Imagine you decided to attend an official lab trial for some pocket money, only to end up in a secret, on paper discontinued CIA mind control experiment that will traumatize you for life or even kill you. Well, in this video we follow 4 victims on their journey through this experiment, look at the overwhelming red flags they miss, and figure out better ways on how to survive and beat the death chamber in The Killing Room 2009. Now, first of all, this movie is based on a true story. It is based on an infamous Stanford prison experiment held back in '71. I leave a source in the comment section for your reference. Basically, it was a methodological experiment in which social psychology students were split into 2 groups: prisoners and prison guards. The experiment was set to last for about 2 weeks, but had to be stopped in less than 1 week because of, well, some complications, I guess. Basically, the guards became corrupt and abused their powers, and the prisoners, well, they were essentially traumatized. In The Killing Room, however, the story is laid out a little bit different. We have 4 strangers participating in an unknown trial and 2 supervisors guiding them. The 2 supervisors are Dr. Phillips and Emily. Emily is a military psychology specialist who has been scouted for this mission in particular. She currently has no idea what to expect and is pretty much left in the unknown, just as us, the viewers. Her boss, Dr. Phillips, has been running these experiments for decades at this point. Not only does he guide the experiment, but as we will learn, he also guides Emily on her path through the next few hours of pretty intense psychological pressure. Upon entering the lab, and after having received a quick brief from Dr. Phillips, he shows her a recording of a past trial that has involved 4 participants. In the video, we witness Carrie entering a white room with only 1 entrance, no windows, sterile white walls, bright lights, and a ventilation system above the ceiling and beneath the ground. She is handed a stack of forms and questionnaires to fill out, and a few minutes later she is joined by Tony, another participant and the first one to realize that the chairs and tables are all bolted to the floor. What might be an unusual feature isn't necessarily a red flag. Having heavy objects bolted to the floor is a frequent safety measure taken, so, well, might be odd, might not be odd, whatever. The last 2 candidates arrive as well, just a few minutes later. We got Crawford, this middle-aged man, who is a seasoned participant in lab trials for many years, because the median compensation for 1 lab trial is around $3,000, so you can make quite some money with that. Anyway, the last one to visit, or the last one to join, is Paul, an introverted, shy individual choosing to sit away from the others. Now, they're eventually visited by Dr. Phillips, showing Emily that her duty is more direct than what she had expected. It's not just about data and analyzing, but hands-on dealing with the prospects as well. He passes the participants more info, dictates the terms, and lets them know what to expect, quite literally. All of them will earn $250 a day, and the trial will last for 8 hours. There will be 4 phases, and the first one has started the moment he, Dr. Phillips, walked in. Now, the way Dr. Phillips talks should ring the bells, okay? I mean, if you were stupid enough to join a secretive lab trial for $250 only, and you still allowed a supervising doctor to mention the following things without asking for clarification, then something is wrong with you. You see, some of the things Dr. Phillips says are how the phases are separated into 4 escalating phases, with emphasis on escalating, and how the participants will be decimated by an elimination process, 1 by 1. Yeah, how about asking about the definition of elimination around here, But what's even weirder to me is how these people join a lab trial without even knowing what this trial will be. That's pretty insane, no? There is no way anybody right in their mind would participate in a random experiment given the potential dangers involved. But it gets even worse, because just a moment after he has commenced his speech, he walks over to Carrie, grabs her on her chin, and passes her a headshot. Just like that. Naturally, everybody panics and is stunned at the same time. Nobody knows what's going on, including Emily, who has just witnessed her supervisor committing a murder. This is effed up, no matter if you're Emily or one of the participants. So what do you do? Well, as a participant, the first thing that comes to mind is that if someone is killed, then the chance that one of us is next is pretty real. Another idea is this fake or is this actually happening? Is this really the government or have we been conned into a trap by some sick people? Well, to be honest, who gives a shit? Because this is life or death, so the details don't really matter, do they? So here's what I would do. If nobody takes leadership, the situation will turn into a free-for-all. And a free-for-all during this effed up situation will end up in violence. Sure, you would still have 33% survival chance if everybody started fighting each other, but if you aren't the strongest and biggest guy in the group, your chances sink drastically. Not to mention that the goal of everybody is to survive anyway, so sticking together is inherently more beneficial to everyone involved. Second thing is to figure out what these people want from us. But looking at the next scene, it becomes obvious that they want us to kill each other, for whatever reason we don't know yet. Just a few minutes after Carrie has been killed, a handgun with one bullet is thrown into the killing room. The handgun not only means power to the one owning it, but it also signifies increased stress levels for every participant. The purpose of the gun is obvious. It's to trigger violence among us and to spur up distrust, so resorting to it would be the worst thing to do. Instead, see the silver lining of it. Now we have a gun, and that is a pretty powerful tool. To keep the trust up, though, I would take the gun apart and equally pass along the parts so nobody could go crazy with it. The downside of that, though, is that you won't be able to put it back together in time in case you want to start fighting the lab people. Now, a minute after the gun has been dropped, a timer starts ticking down, leaving us a bit more than 2 hours to answer one silly quiz question, which is, what number do Americans choose most frequently between 1 and 33? Yeah, that's a weird freaking question, if you ask me. Well, the rules are, whoever picks a number farthest away from the right answer will be the next one to die. Now, having over 2 hours available, I would start scouting the room. We have already established that there are ventilation systems beneath the floor and above the ceiling, but there is one more feature we could so far spot. It's this massive bulletproof viewing glass on one side of the room, promising that we are being watched in real time. Now, whether this matters or not, though, is not the point. The point is to put all your effort into exploring and understanding the situation you're in. In a much later scene, one of the characters attempts to flee through the ventilation system above, almost successfully. It boggles my mind how these 3 dudes aren't doing more than just sitting around for 2 hours only to end up picking a number each and see who's next in line. Instead, if they had worked together and actually tried to escape, the chances were pretty good, especially with a gun. You will see what I mean in a bit. Now, while the characters are waiting for the clock to strike 0, Dr. Phillips reveals that this experiment is a continuation of the MK Ultra mind control program of the CIA from the last century. In case you wonder, this is also rooted in actual historical events, so this program existed. The goal for this lab experiment right here is to play with the minds of the individuals and reprogram them into martyrs. That is also why during the 2-hour wait, our characters suddenly start hearing conversations in Arabic coming from beneath. They start thinking that they have been captured by terrorists instead, but of course in reality this is just an audio playback to trigger exactly these thoughts. The messages they find etched into the walls were also carefully placed there to support the fake narrative. Of course, none of our characters knows any of that, so they suck up every piece of information they get. However, no piece of information so far, whether true or not, will help them escaping. Therefore, in my opinion, it's a waste of time to dwell on these, well, superficial facts, if you ask me. Now, back to the quiz. If you had to guess one number between 1 and 33, which one would you pick? Your chance of dying is 33% no matter what you do, but which number will most likely keep you alive? Well, not sure if there is such number, but intuitively I would have picked 16 or 17, as there are only roughly 15 numbers to each side, leaving you less numbers to be further away from a potential result. If you pick the number towards 33 or 1, there is a much longer distance to the farthest number away. Now, according to this data right here though, which shows the most likely number to be picked by Americans if they had to pick a number between 1 and 100, I guess that's a thing, it looks like single-digit numbers are the safest way to go. Our 3 characters decide to all pick the same number to sort of, cheat their way out. They pick number 7. And once the clock strikes 0 and the numbers have to be passed along, everybody chooses 7, but Paul, he chooses 17. What happens next is quite strange, but will make sense towards the end of this film. The room is flooded with guests and all of them are rendered unconscious and brought away. And here comes the real deal. At this moment, it is revealed that this experiment has been held just mere hours before Emily joined, and now continues with her witnessing directly what is happening rather than watching it on screen. So in reality, even though they are experimenting on 4, now 2 subjects to find the one that fits their criteria best, Emily too is somewhat an experiment. Because only someone who can put the experiment above morals and personal beliefs can stomach it. Now, witnessing atrocities on screen is one thing, but having people tortured in front of you is on a whole different level. Now, Dr. Phillips orders Emily to follow him as they visit the room. Since one has to be killed, Dr. Phillips does it himself. He seems to enjoy this stuff. He takes out a gun and kills the next one in line without showing us who it was. Now technically, it must either be Paul, who has picked number 17, or it has to be both Crawford and Tony, who both picked number 7. But a short while later, after we see the subjects waking up, we realize that Tony was the one who was killed, which goes against all logic. Now before I explain the why of that, let's explore the next few scenes. Crawford explodes, obviously, blaming it all on Paul, because he was the only one deviating from their plan to pick number 7, which makes him now look like a traitor. But this couldn't be further from the truth, and I will explain the why of that as well in just a bit. Now a minute later, a new quiz arrives. This time the question is, where does the United States of America rank on the international list of overall average intelligence quotient? The one farthest away from the right answer will again become a casualty. At the bottom right corner is a hint which says, answer is outside the top 10. Now Crawford rips away the hint and reads the question out loud, obviously planning to con Paul into losing and save himself. But looking at how it turned out with Tony, we can't put our faith into answering these quizzes anymore. And having a hint on the paper is nonsense to begin with, since the baseline wouldn't change if everybody knew about the hint. So the only purpose of this hint is corrupting the captives, who becomes a traitor and who wouldn't become a traitor. This implies that they're either looking for honest people that value other lives just as much as their own, or dishonest people that put themselves before anyone else. Question: would you have hidden the hint like Crawford did, or would you have shared the hint with your fellow captives? Let me know in the comments. Let's see who's who. Now before we connect the dots here, this is what happens next. Now Paul and Crawford decide to try and escape through the ceiling, which to be honest should have happened way before when Tony was still around. The lamp grids are perfect to rip down, which they do successfully. Now while Crawford tries finding a way through the air shaft and actually finds a solid way out, Paul stays back and well faces a different kind of problem. Now the only bad thing with Crawford right now is that there is another grid separating him from outside. But looking at this grid quality, with enough force, he shouldn't have trouble breaking through. At the same time, Paul, who is left behind, is surprised by 2 lab employees. He tries to escape through them but is tasered to the ground. Now, if we go back to when Tony was still alive, this could have worked out. If all 3 of them stuck together and tried the ceiling above, they would have had a great chance of escaping. At this point, however, having the 2 lab rats separated, and therefore their power halved, an escape is almost impossible. While both of them failed to escape and now are back in the same shitty and helpless position like before, Dr. Phillips reveals that the winner has already been chosen. The whole purpose of this experiment, and all others before and afterwards, is to find rare individuals who have the willpower to sacrifice themselves for the greater good. You see, most people instinctively fight or flight in the eye of death. It's almost like a reflex, like breathing. But some individuals can shut this instinct off and sacrifice themselves instead. Now while Dr. Phillips is explaining this to Emily, the 2 last candidates try to figure out a last plan to escape. Crawford cons Paul into naming a number from 1 to 5 so that he can pick one above and win. But shortly after the timer comes to 0 and the numbers have to be mentioned, Paul looks deeply into Crawford's eyes, thanks him for the effort in taking leadership, wishes him good luck, and attempts to kill himself instead. But just upon pulling the trigger, the lab people enter the room, shoot Crawford dead instead, and make Paul the winner of this experiment. The gun on which he had pulled the trigger on was dysfunctional, indicating that it was never meant to be used in the first place. So when Paul picked number 17, he actually tried to sacrifice himself and save Tony and Crawford. But since the game is rigged, it didn't work. Now, if he had voiced his failed plan afterwards to Crawford, they may have had a chance of realizing the purpose of this game. However, whether they knew about the goal of this experiment or not, I don't think it would have made a difference. Dr. Phillips reveals that only 1 in 20 individuals prove to be able to become civilian weapons. In other words, people who willfully sacrifice themselves for the country. Paul is brought into another room where 2 other captives are waiting. The movie is a little bit ambiguous during this scene, but a voice through the speaker says, Phase 2, Indoctrination, pointing at the possibility that Paul will be made a murderer during this phase. Now, interestingly enough, before Paul comes to this room, he tries escaping one more time, tries to convince Emily to help him, but she, having also successfully overcome her trial, leaves him to his fate and therefore becomes a dedicated new member of the MKUltra program. So, what do you think about this movie? Did you enjoy it? Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching as always. Leave a like if you want to, and I'll see you again soon. Peace out, binge another one.